it's really wonderful to have the show here, and I'm really grateful to everybody at the gallery for hanging it so beautifully and being so wonderful to work with. And I think the show, I've gotten such a great response to it, and I think if I didn't know myself so well already, that I might even want to meet myself if I saw the show. It makes me feel like a painter. But, and one reason I think it looks really so wonderful in here is that I love the quotation of the French painter Bonnard, who said the best things about museums are the windows. And the windows here are great for these paintings. I mean, looking out the window makes me feel kind of as calm as I hope my paintings make me feel, or I strive to make them look. Most of the paintings, a lot of them were painted during the pandemic, but there are a couple of earlier ones that I'm happy to have like a mix, and there are some earlier ones that I reworked. But the one over the desk is the earliest painting. I think it's from 2009. It's called Flowers and Weeds. I always feel that everybody thinks my pictures are flowers and that I must be a gardener, but I really think they're more about weeds, and which is more realistic for me. Or the earlier works I realize are much more opaque than the ones I'm doing now. I think part of the more translucent elements in the work came from making etchings, color prints, where you don't use white. You have to use a thinner layer of ink and have the white of the paper come through. And I've been trying to do that in my oil paintings, and not mixing white with everything, which is sort of it's sort of a go-to solution for me. So I try to be conscious of that and not use white, unless it's just to have something that's white in the painting. And most of the pictures, somebody at the opening said, how do you come up with the titles? And the titles always come later, but for me, the paintings really, when I look at them, I tend to feel, I remember how I felt when I was painting them, rather than thinking, oh, that's a specific place or a memory of something specific. I mean, when I start painting, sometimes I wish I painted the landscape or a person, so I'd know I still have to do the nose or get the eye right or the branch of the tree right, and then it would be done. I mean, I know it's not like that if that's what one does, but from the outside, it seems like I would know what it's going to look like at the end. But when I start a picture, I have no idea what it's going to be, and I really don't really feel like I know how to paint, and it's sort of like learning each time, and it's almost, I mean, I'm sure some of you feel like this too, that it's always sort of, I'm always failing, which is good. I mean, I think failure is a really important way to grow. And what? Okay, so titles, how about this? My paintings look really cheery. I often say that, I've told this story probably to all of you already 4 times, but when people meet me who don't already know me, but they know my work, they always disappointedly say, "You're Bill Scott?" And I say, "Yeah, I know. You were expecting this really tall, handsome man with red hair and a Hawaiian shirt and buff and, you know, surfboard or something, and said you got this middle-aged, pear-shaped, bald guy with glasses." And the guy who I said that to actually said, "Yeah." So, but I never looked like that other guy, but if I had, I wouldn't have been able to paint the way I do. It took me a long time to get here. And they're generally, people always expect me to be happier than I am, and I'm not, but I watch the news. But this painting probably has the saddest association for me to it, because I called it a recurrent memory. But in 2009, the year I painted that one, a friend of mine died, and his widow gave me some of his art supplies, and I gave most of them to younger student painters, thinking that would be like metaphorically a good thing to do with his paint, since he can't use it anymore. Give it to young people who will, and they didn't really care about it, but which was sort of crushing. But he had this one board that with canvas. It's I forget what. Oh, it's on canvas, but it's a type of board that he always liked. And so I have it in the studio for about for 13 years, and I didn't want to touch it. I mean, I wanted to paint on it, but I didn't want to touch it because I thought once I painted on it, he would be gone. So but then when the pandemic came in, I thought I was going to die. I thought I better paint on this because, or give it to someone else young and curse them with the responsibility of trying to bring meaning to something that this kind of has no meaning. Some of the titles, well, so that was called recurrent memory because whenever I looked at the unpainted board, I thought about him. Running between weeds was, everybody thinks I'm always high or something, but I'm not. It's from a song. I can't even remember what the song was now, but it was a song I liked. And this one was in a show a couple of years ago. In 2017, I did it, and then I got it back, and it just didn't sit right for me. So I started reworking it and started to turn it into a completely different painting. But it's still I like it a lot better now. And I don't know, I want to feel engaged by the pictures. Like, I don't want to just say, oh yeah, or I want them to unfold. A friend of mine once said that I visited him when he was in Paris staying with a relative of his, and his relative was an art collector, and I hated everything in the apartment. And opposite his bed was this terrifying painting, and I thought, God, how do you go to bed to that? Or how do you wake up to it? And he said, oh, that's not so bad. When I look at that, I see it all in the first 15 seconds, like I do with every painting I look at, and I get it. But the problem with this is that no matter how many more times I look at it, I never see anything more in it than I saw in the first 15 seconds. But with really good paintings, no matter how, I see it all in the first 15 seconds, but no matter how many more times I look at it and for how long, I see new things in it, and it continues to unfold. So that's what I want my paintings to do for me. I can't say what they do for you. And when I started painting, I thought I was going to grow up to be a figure painter. I love Fairfield Porter and Alice Neal. But I started, when I got a studio in school, I tried to trade poses with people so that I could keep painting figures. But I'm kind of gullible, so I would be the first one to pose. And they would finish their painting, and then when it was time for them to pose for me, they were nowhere to be found. So I stopped painting people because I stopped liking them. And I started doing still lifes. And to me, I love doing still lifes, except the one kind of curse for it. I mean, I don't know how Christine Lafuente does it. I mean, she just like soldiers on. But and makes it new. But I quit because I got sick of I was younger then and trying to be nice and have everyone like me and do the right thing and say the right thing. And I would go to Thanksgiving and Christmas and holiday things with family, and all my aunts and uncles and older cousins would talk to me about how pretty my still lifes were. And I just got sick of it. So I started painting abstractly, and that I got rid of them all. So they stopped talking to me about my pictures, which was the best way for me to keep painting them, because I couldn't be painting them for them or for their responses. So, but this one to me feels like a still life. And so it's called An Irretrievable Pleasure. I don't know what that title came from, but it was pleasurable to paint still lifes. And I've always had sort of a shallow space in my work. From the still lifes were kind of figure ground, middle ground, background, all within about this much space. And I sometimes have a vaster space, but with the one on this side of this wall at the end, and then on the other side of this wall, they're both called bas-relief 1 and 2. So and this is, you don't have to see this, but for me, the titles come from, well, Mary Page Evans is here, who has a show coming up in a couple of months, and I met her through Joan Mitchell, and when Joan Mitchell was a big influence on me, and on Mary Page. And she used to talk, when she got really drunk at night, she would talk about her desire to do bas-relief sculptures. And I was really also interested in the work of Bertha Morisot, who had also done a bas-relief and did sculpture. And so when I was doing these, I was thinking about both of those things, and I felt like I kept making the space in the painting shallow instead of vast. I mean, I want the illusion of vastness, but I think physically it feels shallow, even though that's odd because they're two-dimensional. But so that's where those titles come from. And the middle one here with the blue that's on the cover of the brochure, John, a couple of years ago, somebody asked me why I do so many circles. And I've written about this, so you might already know this. But when I was, I didn't know what to say. But when I was a little kid, my parents had a phone by the washing machine. And if I was on the phone with someone who I didn't want to talk to, I would find myself sketching squares because I felt boxed in by the conversation. I hadn't gone to therapy yet though, so I didn't know that's what it meant. And then later, if it was an okay conversation, but I still would like to get away, I would draw triangles. And because you can slide around them, but they're still an angle that can hurt you. But if it was a good conversation, someone I liked, I would find myself drawing circles. So I found myself, I've always used circles in paintings ever since the very beginning. Like, I mean, I've been painting 49 years. I started art school 49 years ago, which is terrifying to think about. But, and circles are like placeholders for flowers, or some friend of mine tells me they're all people, but they're not people to me. But they are to him, and that's okay. I mean, any painting should be able to be interpreted by the person looking at it. It doesn't have to be what it means to me, and they're usually frustrated if I don't agree with them. But they don't always agree with me either. So, and the one at the end, I called that one. That one went on for a long time, and I called it Flowers for Patrick Connors, who was a friend of mine who died about 1.5 years ago. He might have shown here at one point, I'm not sure. It was the most wonderful guy, and he was a realist painter. When I was in school, everybody used to harass me because I felt they were harassing me. They probably weren't. But they used to tell me that all my paintings were going to fall apart because I wasn't doing anything right. And Pat and I went out for a martini one night about 6 years ago. And I said, you know what you used to always tell me about my paintings are going to fall apart? None of them have fallen apart. I mean, I was really careful and attentive to what I did. And he said, that's funny because mine did. So, you know, there's no right way to do it, but sometimes there is. So now I'm going in here. do. I'm right-handed, so I paint with my right hand. I often turn the paintings upside down and paint with my left hand, just so that I change the kind of handwriting, because sometimes it feels like everything's just kind of going on automatically, and I can't stand it. And sometimes I think if I don't know what to do, well, what would I do if this was an etching, or which I think is where a lot of the black lines started to come in, or how do I ruin this? How do I make it not work? Because that's usually subconsciously the way to get it to be to keep me present and to make it more, I don't know, just keep me there. When I go into the studio, I have people used to ask me, like, what do you think about, or what's your idea? And I always say I don't think about anything and I have no ideas. The paintings aren't about expressing an idea to me. More a feeling, but I recognize maybe what that is later. And I guess like a lot of people, I unfortunately remember the bad things people say and not the good things, but people always just say never put a line down the middle of the painting, the center. So I always try to put a line down the middle of the painting, even if it's, whether it's drawn or just kind of indicated visually for the way your eye moves. This was another painting I reworked called Winter Flowers. Bruce Garrity, who probably a lot of you know because he used to teach at Newark, and he was at the opening. He organized a group show a few years ago in Camden, New Jersey, probably 15 years ago, called Winter Garden. And I was doing etchings then, and so he took a bunch of little black and white etchings of mine that were in the show. And later I thought, like, I know what to paint for this show, but I didn't at the time. So when I did this, I called it Winter Garden. And then it came back to me, and I had it in the studio for a long time. And I unwrapped it. I hadn't had it in a long time, which is, for me, the best way to do anything, to face it to the wall and forget about it, and then look at it again, and then I know what to do to it. But if I'm looking at it, I don't always know what to do if I'm constantly looking at it. So so I reworked it and got really excited about it. And I think because it's a slightly earlier painting, it kind of hits the ball back to the other ones in a nice way. You know, basically I want them to be about pleasure. And you know, and I mean, I've been talking a lot, but basically I want them to not require words. The big one I called Half a World Away, after a song by this guy, Richard Schindler, love it, called You, and just talking about someone's ghost and having them always present in his life, even though they're absent. And at the time I first heard it, my parents and a lot of friends had died, so I thought it was about mourning, but it was really about this woman he met in Paris. He went home to Long Island and she went home to Buenos Aires, and he missed her, and there was a line in it, even though you're half a world away, I'll always miss you and I'll always love you and you're always welcome here. So during pandemic, I thought, well, I like that sentiment, whether it's for a living person or a dead person. So that's where that title came from. I mean, I've been to Paris before, but I had a travel prize from school, so I went over and I stayed for 5 months, and I knew a lot of people. I had a 7th-floor walk-up. It was great. I loved it. I always was going to go back there and live there for a year or two, but I never did. But at the end of the time, I met all these guys who were students at the École de Beaux-Arts, and one of them let me share a studio. And they all said they loved American abstract painting, but none of them had heard of Diebenkorn, Gustin, or Joan Mitchell. So a friend of mine here sent me some reproductions, little black and white from magazines and stuff of their work. And there was one Greek guy, a painter, who knew of Joan's work, and he said he was having a show at a gallery in Paris coming up. And I said, well, Joan Mitchell's a woman, and he couldn't believe it. He said, like Joan Miro, he thought she was a man. And and then I couldn't find the gallery for a long time, which was good, because I ended up, the day I found it was when they were in there hanging the show. And she gave me a beer. This was in May of 1980, and she gave me a beer, and I was blown away by the paintings and helped them hang this big 22-foot, 5-panel painting called The Goodbye Door, and it weighed a ton. I was really, and everybody was really nice to me, but I was 23. So, you know, who's not nice to someone who's 23? And they took me out to dinner, and Joan invited me over for lunch a few days later, and it was my birthday, so I brought a chocolate cake, and there was only one thing she liked more. The only thing she liked more than chocolate cake was whiskey. So I did the right thing without realizing, or I benefited from my actions without realizing, without an intent to do so. So, and yeah, but there have been a lot of painters. It's really nice here. I feel very sympathetic to being in the same space with Christine Lafuente and Michael Doyle and other painters, and Jamie Wyatt. When I was a little kid in 1967, he had, I think in 66 or 67, he had a show at the, Andrew Wyeth had a show at the Academy, and I had to wear a coat and tie, and we went in to see it with my parents and stood in line all the way back. The line went around up Ray Street to where the student entrance was. I remember standing there and going in and looking at the Andrew Wyeth and seeing that he painted every individual vein and every leaf and every on each tree, and I thought, I don't want to be a painter. I have enough trouble with math. I can't do this. But I like a lot of things now that I ran away from when I was younger. It can take, well, this one I started in 2016 and ended this year, so 7 years. I am good at math. And that one I started maybe at the start of the pandemic, or maybe right before, in 2019, and completed it, I think, in 22. But I'm working on 2 in my studio now that I started in 1992, and I just face them to the wall. Once Hollis Taggart was coming to see my work, the man at the gallery I show at in New York, and I had all these paintings going, and I thought, these are awful. Like, he can't see these or he'll kick me out. So I hid them. I faced them to the wall. They were about this size. I faced them to the wall and then put bigger ones in front of them in case I had to leave the studio. And he thought, I wonder what's here. And look through and he'd say nothing, because the first 10 would be nothing. But then about 8 months later, I berated myself and thought, you gotta get going and start some new things. You're doing nothing with your life. And I thought, oh, I'll work on, there are some little canvases, I'll pull them out. And I pulled them out, and I didn't even recognize them. And I thought, wow, these look like yours, but who did these? And I thought, these are great. And I know just what to do to them. And then I thought, oh, they are yours. But it was just a funny, maybe it's the beginning of Alzheimer's, but I hope not. No, it's good. Yeah, I think it's really good to kind of let things go and take myself out of the equation when painting, and separate from them and then look at them new, and then I usually know what to do. Or I often put a piece of tape down the center of a painting if I don't know what to do, and kind of look at it and think, try to do the first thing that comes to my mind. It sort of makes it like a tennis court, like what, you know where to put something. A friend of mine once in France, he and his boyfriend and I were having dinner, and we were walking into a restaurant, and the one guy said, "If you had to kill one of us, which one would you kill?" And I thought, what? And he said, "No thinking." And so I thought really quick of something else to say and changed the subject. And when we sat down, his friend said to me, "Don't worry about the question. He just wants to know which one of us you like more." But I thought the thing I took from that was the no thinking. It's really important not to think. There's no right answer. You just jump in, and it's important to allow yourself to fail, because that's the best thing in the world to do. And I think as an abstract painter, people always say, "How do you know when it's finished?" And a friend of mine used to say, I know I always stop while I still know what to do next. Because if you do everything, you might as well just nail it shut. It's better to leave it a little open, a little kind of almost imperfect. You know, I like that thought, the sentiment of seeking truth, not perfection. I want to keep it alive. Not specifically, no. But there were a lot of artists there were some artists who I loved when I was younger, and I'm not as interested in their work now. And there were others that I loved, and when I see them now, I love them. I feel like I've never seen them before, even though I've known them for over 50 years. I feel that way every time I go to the Barnes and I look at that blue Matisse still life, and I just think, wow, like, how was that made? And when I look at pictures, I don't look at I know what the image is of, but I'm looking at how it's made. I used to say, if I was giving a group crit, that if there were two different painters, I'd say, well, if I had to get a back massage from one of these artists, I wouldn't want it from this one, because the touch is the opacity, everything is applied with the same pressure. But I would love one from this painter, because it's all a differentiated touch, and thin lines, thick lines, flat colors, air. It would feel better, I think. So I want that for my eyes, and from the eyes it goes in here. This makes you see it differently, to keep seeing it, and not to see what, I usually see what I already know, and it's really important to kind of let that go and try to see what's there. That's the same as facing it to the wall and bringing it out 2 weeks later, and you see it. I see it differently. I mean, but everybody does it differently. They're not all going to do it that way, and it's not going to work. I mean, I can't tell another person how to do it, and they sure can't tell me either. Yeah, I always say I listen to very representational music, because I listen to songs with beginnings, middles, and ends, and I don't always know what they mean, though. Like, I love Leonard Cohen, but I don't know what it means, really, always. I mean, I know how I feel. When I was 13, my aunt gave me his 3 or 4 records he had then, his 2 novels and his poetry books, and she said, "You're old enough for these now." And I'm still not old enough for them, but I love them, and I read all the books and read all the poetry and listened to the words, and have been confused ever since. But I love it. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks.